Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 222nd episode of Book of Hours, playing as the artist for our first run through YouTube. I've reloaded the game, so I've got my little shortcuts back. And we're basically at the end of our early days in winter after Numa. And we are wrapping up sort of the remaining books that I need to read. Now, we'll probably get one from Oriflammes, which I'm certainly looking forward to, because being able to level up some of the higher level skills is an important one for me. But one of the other things I'm going to want to do is generate sort of the long-lasting memories, the persistent memories again. So, but first things first, let's just get the day's work taken care of. I don't have too many expectations in terms of anything else that we're going to get done as far as crafting is concerned, but we can at least preserve a memory. There tis and give me no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. So one of the things for me to keep in mind while I'm thinking of what memory to preserve is the fact that we want to be leveling up Edict's Inviolable to as close to 8 as I can get. Unfortunately, we don't have enough to be able to get it fully to 8. And so, in this case here, the obvious choice would be Confounding Parable because it has the moon. But the other alternative here, right? We're looking at Heart and Moon. So we also have the Solace, and the one thing that makes the Solace a little less attractive is the fact that we can potentially get that from someone like Mrs. Kill. Unfortunately, I don't think we can bring the Confounding Parable because I'm in the Violet Chamber. So, looks like I'm stuck with the Solace anyway. Now that night has fallen, I can rest and perhaps dream on the day's doings. The skill is now level 8, its power aspects have also increased, and here, it's best when it's warm, but it'll keep. Witching to Saint, to mend a broken heart, to color a pale soul. So this was just a replacement for what was in the library. I should maybe mention as well, again, sometimes this stuff can seem like a desperate attempt for audience engagement. I'm not 100% sure how many more episodes there will be in this given playthrough, but we are definitely, I think it will surprise people who haven't seen how this game ends, how rapidly we will get to the end of the game. So I think it would be, especially because I've got things to do for the intervening days, if anybody would like to see the description of something or would like me to investigate a particular item inside the house, now would actually be a good time to do that. One thing that I wasn't planning on doing was take every single consumable and use that in the consider verb, but if you do want to see something, so for instance, if you want me to like dissect Ava's locks or or a serpentinite slab or something like that, this is the sort of thing, obviously there's a little bit of sensitivity in terms of backseating and things like that, but clearly if I'm extending the invitation to do this sort of stuff, I'm not going to put anyone on blast for asking for something that they want to see. This is definitely a good time to get those requests in, because I do still have enough runway to be able to get the. I have enough runway to sort of get get that into part of the episode. But I also know that I'm going to be running out in terms of, in terms of time to do that before too long. So, just a heads up for those of you that might have been wanting me to interact with an object which either I haven't interacted with or possibly interacted with, but in an episode that people don't remember or didn't get a chance to see. Speak with Mrs. Kill. Mrs. Kill's mood always improves when I drop by. If you don't choose a topic, Mrs. Kill will offer help as a friend. Now, I think the best thing that I can do just right off the bat is to get everything that I will need for Edict's Inviolable. So that's basically every Moon and Heart memory that I can get my hands on. So we'll start with Crossing to Noon. And we have lots of Arab to work with here, so I'll kind of prioritize that. Okay. Impulse doesn't do anything for me here. Satisfaction, we'll get back to that. I won't rule it out, but I'd like to see if we can do better. On to Debellus Mirorum. Foresight doesn't work. Regrets, not really. Intuitions we might get from Mrs. Kill. Gossip we had but don't use. Fear doesn't really work. Hindsight, no. Storm. Now potentially we can get that from Mrs. Kill, but I feel comfortable enough to throw that in there. So let's get you with the Tryst. Secret Thresholds, not so much. Patterns, not so much. This is Solace, isn't it? Yeah, why not? Cheerful Ditty definitely works in this case. Nona's Desk lets me use a confounding parable. Did I forget Natan's Desk? I did. So for that, we go... Beguiling Melodies doesn't work in this case. Revelations, not so much. Savage Hymn, not so much. Bittersweet Certainties doesn't really do that much for me. So I suppose, with all that in mind, I should be comfortable either getting the Intuition or the... Well, let's go for the Intuition in this case. We'll take the Orchid Transfigurations a feast. And then, on top of that, I do want to interact with the film. So here we have The Open Head, Ilse Bischoff's hallucinatory quasi-documentary, notionally about the Greco-Turkish War of the previous decade. So for that, we will take Hyksos. We need an element of the soul, so we can put Grail in here. So really, we just need 5 edge to work with. I'm not going to be using Disciplines of the Hammer, so this is just as easy. And I don't really have a memory that I can interact with using the Edict's Martial right now, so I'm sort of holding off on... I'm kind of holding off on leveling up, or on getting the Wormwood Dream, but I guess I can get the Curious Hunch at the Shrine to St. Januarius. Well, I can when I have a memory, never mind. I've carried a memory like a flambeau safe through the mazes of night. I completely forgot that I had a solace already, so shame on me. Hail. Doesn't really give me any... Well, actually, I could use that with the Auroral Contemplations, now that I think of it. Mrs. Kill stands ready to help. You always cheer me up, she says morosely. Mrs. Kill has seen more of the world than she usually lets on. Conversations with her yield the occasional surprise. Actually, one other thing that I can do while we're waiting, I can take the Swaddled Thunder and turn it into a storm. So we have 2 rounds with the Edict's Inviolable, although given that I know I'm going to be using the Edge for Auroral Contemplations, I can generate some of that too. There it is and can be no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. So we should get these memories before she gives me the second one. Won't be too much overlap there. Alright, and we just wiped out what we already had. So the Crossing to Noon. The mystic Garcia Sowry gives a picturesque account of the adventures of Franklin Bancroft, Prince of Wines, and Ava de Wolf, the Pale Lady, on their way to the hidden island of Noon. For a long time, the Blackbone pondered her next move, until the moon dared to peep from behind a cloud, and the prince completed the composition of his third sestina, but the lady met the blind gaze of its open pores, waiting for the tide. Garcia Sauri acknowledges in an epilogue that it is widely known that Ava in fact tragically drowned herself, and that herself and her twin infant granddaughters, without ever making such a journey. But, he adds contemptuously, it is also widely known that the city unbuilt will so remain, that only one history is ever written, and that Janus is a Mansus prank. De Bellis Murorum, an 18th century epic poem by the pseudonymous Lipstos. The poem elliptically describes a war between beasts, weather phenomena, and arcane concepts. It's quite specific about their tactics. The two one joined, and the horn distinguished, consequently blood. The Orchid Transfigurations of Feast, a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. The illustrations are certainly striking. They flush the skin and glow beneath the eyelids after the book is closed. We must devour to be devoured. We cannot be undevoured, as we cannot be unborn. Traveling at Night, Volume 2. The Annotated Dream Journals of Christopher Olopoli, sometimes called the only readable occultist. Literate, entertaining, bewildering. There is an extensive discussion on the comparisons between Olopoli's own dreams and those of the Emperor Elagabalus, who Olopoli regards as a dupe or avatar of the sun in rags. The white is west of the world, Olopoli remarks, and winter does not wait forever. Elagabalus found his way to the White Door at last, thankfully. Speech can't pass the White Door, and honestly, Elagabalus never had anything very interesting to say. I tried to follow in his footsteps, but I never learnt enough of the White. I suppose I'm thankful for that too, but here's what I do know. Peace after trouble. The Instruments of the Heart. I always really liked this one. So, Sister Isabel, then precentress of the Abbey Church of St. Brendan's, engages in dialogues with a heart-long of a kind called Dwendrazon that has taken partial possession of her body. The Dwendrazon, like all its kind, usually dwells in the Mansus, but can enter the physical world by manifesting as music, or take possession of a willing or semi-willing mortal who hears and loves that music, like Isabella. Isabella records her dreams of the High Mansus, where she is accorded the Dwendrazon status and titles. In return, the Dwendrazon enjoys what it calls Sejura, a welcome oblivion. Our mostly blessing is that we may never cease, except in Sejure. There is something more that Isabella refers to as the Sejura Magna, but she laments that her Dwendrazon will not tell her exactly what that might be. I think one of the reasons for this is that I very often will see references to these abysses and their specific mystical experiences, and I generally like the inclusion of music in Book of Hours in a way that wasn't necessarily present. There were clearly things like Apollo and Marsyas inside of Cultist Simulator and that, but the presence of sky and a lot of specific references to music in this is something that I've really enjoyed. And it's very hard for me. I don't know if this is a deliberate connection that that Weather Factory had intended, or it's just one of these things where, you know, you bring a little bit of your own reading into a game. But I've always found it very hard not to think of figures like Hildegard von Bingen, who I actually found out through originally through Apple Music's sort of, they have this nice little tour of classical music. It's quite good. The order is a little funny, but it's an enjoyable little journey for those of you that may have that streaming service. And yeah, you know, something catches your fancy, you read up on it, and it's always been very hard for me not to think of some figures like that over the course of playing this game. All right, Apollo and Marsyas, the libretto of a lost opera concerning the contest between Apollo and Marsyas and its tragic outcome. The librettist is identified only by their initials. In the original myth, Marsyas lost the musical contest and was flayed by Apollo, who later regretted it. In this version, Marsyas' skin has a further history. The skin of Marsyas gives oracles and is later smuggled to Phrygia, where the priestesses of Cybele use it for a drum. At the climax, the striking of the drum drives would-be violators of the priestesses to suicidal madness. The opera ends with a wistful hymn from the youngest priestess on the beauty of mountain pines. So, a storm. And finally, it is written, Musgrave, fourth of the DeWolf line, writes tentatively about the Covenant of Brankrug and the legacy of the sacred inks he calls Incasta Potentialia. As light passeth through a prism into many colors, so the great inks separateth into the lesser inks, and the lesser inks into the inks minor. Musgrave coyly refuses to talk about the great inks, or else refuses to admit that he doesn't know much about them. He insists that Ugol and Stargol, which can be mixed with sufficient nectar or sky aspect, are sufficient for most befitting purposes. Okay. We got 0.3 seconds before I get my consider verb available. I think we can just turn that over and see where the what I've got to play with here. Swaddled thunder, a storm swathed in subtle threats, ready to be released with a few judicious snips. The thread parts, the weave is empty, the skies cry out. Okay, let's get Edicts Inviolable leveled up. Whoopsies. We will use the core in this case. So we only need 5 memories in this case. So what I want to try and do here is use the ones that potentially can be regenerated by other people. So the Solace, the Intuition, and the Memory Storm are the best starting ones. And from there, I guess... we'll do the Cheerful Ditty and the Salt. All right, and then we'll do this all again. So, Whist. This one I'll use the health. And actually, on this one, I think I'm going to get a Stolen Secret. We'll get a replacement Cheerful Ditty. So we just need 6. We actually already have what we need there. So maybe what I'll start doing is I'll start prepping some stuff to level up Auroral Contemplations. That's a Lantern and Edge combination. And there's a couple that I can use that'll be really helpful. So for instance, Glimmerings is something that Mrs. Kill won't generate for us. Revelation is something that she can, so let's just hold off on that. In fact, I may be at the limit already in terms of sort of special things that I can do, because we've already used the Contradictions. Yeah, Foresight. I mean, again, it's not the end of the world if some of these get doubled up. Yeah, you know, rather than put our heads in the sand, let's, you know, we'll get some things like Fear and Foresight and such. So if we go, this is Contradictions, this is Satisfaction, this is Impulse. Foresight. Yeah, we can start with Foresight. So we'll read Ava's Treasury. Regrets doesn't help. I do like... I think I've read this recently, but... Oops. Okay, Hindsight, I guess we can get another storm here. And finally, Caller's Desk. I don't even know what I want to get out of that. Solace? No, Solace doesn't. Solace is for my other one. All right, well, we'll save the Contradiction when the time comes. All right, Gossip doesn't really do that much for me, but I'm also not going to complain. I should actually also be thinking about where I can get the... Actually, you know what? We're early enough in the day. I think I'm going to try and... I can't do that at a desk now. So if I try to get a Wormwood Dream... Can use the old wound in a pinch. Yeah, we'll do that. It's easy enough for me to get the Wormwood Dream again. So we'll finish watching the last of the films. We will, at the very least, finish leveling up, as far as we can at least, Edicts Inviolable. And we might, if we're lucky, get a chance to start on Auroral Contemplations. The skill is now level 6. Its power aspects have also increased. We're also a little bit lucky in terms of the fact that we're trying to level up Edicts Inviolable and Auroral Contemplations, just simply because I have quite a few things with Edge, Lantern, Heart, and Moth that aren't really being used for anything else. So this is true in general. Like, we've committed enough stuff to the Tree of Wisdoms now that I shouldn't feel constrained in terms of elements of the soul. And in fact, in reality, I can probably be going to these altars and just doing a bit more in general, but I wanted to... Ooh, no, I hope we didn't... Okay, I think we're okay for memories, but let's just... Yeah, let's do this in order. The Open Head, Ilse Bischoff's hallucinatory quasi-documentary, notionally about the Greco-Turkish War of the previous decade. A hammer-armed Turk and a sword-armed Greek pursue each other through the Pindus, setting traps for each other, robbing peasants, chalking insulting graffiti on walls. The tone is notionally anti-war, but any scholar of the invisible arts would recognize the Edge Hour subtext and the Hyksos messages in the graffiti. The sword wielder methodically fills a church with candles, lights each one, strips again to the waist to reveal his terrible scars. His chest somehow swings open like a cupboard to reveal a blood-drenched book, and the film ends. So a little hint for something that we already did. We get a revelation for that, so I will make a note in the... So most of these are revelation. Kind of nice to know that all the film stuff is lanterny. The Queen's Turn, a 16th century translation of the Barrowchild's account of Lagia's turn, when Lagia, the Queen Unsated, was offered the opportunity to enter the service of the Hours of the Triple Knot as long as she repudiated her brother-lover Antaios. Lagia accepts, setting aside the arts of the Low Red Sun associated with Antaios. She bargains, however, for freedom for her daughters. The Hours of the Triple Knot accept casually, knowing that Lagia has devoured her daughters, but wily Lagia has decided in the secret hollow of her heart that she will adopt any who ask if they can prove their fierceness. The traditions described here, the ones generally described as hill and hollow, are associated with Lagia before her turn, but now that she is a name of the Red Grail, they might also be safely used before an altar of the Triple Knot. Glimmerings, an anonymous prison diary written by a dreamer convicted of oniric irresponsibility and confined to the Kukurbet. The prisoner is plainly terrified and bewildered by their situation, and has been unable to wrangle a coherent explanation out of anyone, but the dreams keep coming, and they keep writing them down. Snow, broken mirrors, half-heard sky music, flowers of white, red, and black, a blood-streaked winter dawn, the most notorious signifiers of oniric risk, fantastically vivid and detailed. No wonder they were locked up. Their final recorded dream is of a worm jewel beneath Brankrug Isle, which they open with a key carved from their finger bone. Eventually, the sun in rags always brings its beautiful ending. The Orchid Transfiguration's Noon, the third volume of a compilation of quasi-Rosicrucian allegories, supposedly by Robert Flood. This is in the original Latin. A long dialogue between the Mountain Mother and the Vigilant Storm describes the ways in which both mountains and storms end, and the protections they use against those ends. "But we must use the knife," said the lion-throned one, "the noose, the flame, the waking word against those who have passed the three-valved door, and so none may pass. That is our law and the law of the sun." The Gospel of Zacchaeus, an extremely heterodox account of the Nazarene Messiah and his works, describing his ascension to the mansus through the opening of his body. 7 were the wounds of his body, 7 the doors of the house, 7 the lesser aspects of the hours, and Knock the aspect above all, for the mother of ants is the mother of salvation. The book includes a description of a rite which can be used to raise a corpse to half-life in memory of he who bled for the wood, but the marginalia claim that the mother of ants is no longer permits use of this rite. Perugian Diaries. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Lopoli left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. For 4 years, since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Alopoli served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protege, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees, but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We've agreed to part almost amicably." Alopoli left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of his journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, in the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of Old Lake Fucinus near Ortuccio. Ava's Treasury. Ava de Wolf, last of the Brandkrugs, discusses the occult and aesthetic properties of jewels and other precious minerals. Black nephrite and scolecite for nowhere, orichalcic and amber for Ys, amethyst for the night key of the spider door. Ava points out, bitterly, that there is no shortage of uplifting parables and proverbs about the saving graces of a flaw in a jewel, but that no one, not a jeweler, nor priest, nor hour, has ever found a way to repair such a flaw. So again, this will be for Auroral Contemplations. 2 more. The Sevenfold Slaying of the Seven Coiled, an account of the destruction of a primeval hour, a god who was stone. There are 12 verses. In the first, an ascendant hour, identified as the Scarred One, enumerates his justifications for destroying the Seven Coiled, its appetites, its growth, its enmity to humanity. In the second, a priestess puts out his eyes and scars his skin to protect him against the Seven Coiled's magics. In each of the next 7 verses, he destroys one aspect of the Seven Coiled. In the 10th verse, the Scarred One bathes his priestess patron in the blood of the Seven Coiled to lend her power. In the 11th, they assault the temple behind the world, entering it by force. In the 12th, they swear a tripartite oath to protect their ancestors, their descendants, and themselves. And finally, What Does Not Bark. Alexander Probst writes warily of Calyptra, a law, principle, or society which prevents the dissemination of dangerous knowledge. Calyptra, like the planet that occludes the star or the Doylean dog that fails to bark, can be identified only by its absence. Even the name, I think, must be a mask. Calyptra is said to make exceptions specifically for the libraries of the Watchman's Tree. Does it make those exceptions so the hours can make use of them? Okay, no shortage of memories to work with. Let's get a conversation going with Mrs. Kill. And now we will do our level 4 Edicts Inviolable. Okay, so I want to be a little careful on this one here, just because anything with heart is not going to be useful to me anymore. So we'll take the Memory Storm, Cheerful Ditty Storm, Solace. Okay, so I need 2 more. Let's do the Stolen Secret, because that may wind up... yeah, we'll do these 2. Stolen Secret and Confounding Parable. We may get the Stolen Secret for Mrs. Kill, and the Confounding Parable is easy enough for me to restore. So when I thought I'd understood, I'd only begun. Improve the skill to level 7. So while we are waiting... let's get the Confounding Parable back, because there's no way that I'm going to get that from Mrs. Kill. And there's a side of me that says I really should be creating some of these other ones. Maybe we'll get the Didumos at this point. So let's go, we'll use, I'll hold off on the, well, I can't really hold off on the Faust. I think Applebright Euphonies is my strongest. And we are 2 short. Can't use the Hail. Okay, so I have a slightly better way of doing this. And then what we can do here is we can take the Mazarine Fife. So evoke a chilly sky influence. And in fact, I can drop the Faust at this point because we have the Mazarine Fife. And I actually suspect I can probably make an Ascendant Harmony, although that might be a little... Well, I could have done it with the Didymos. Yeah, maybe that's a little strong. I can, however, probably get, if I do Preliminal Meter with a Shapt... If I take this Occult Scrap, I can get a Curious Hunch. I can't remember if the Enduring Reflection is a persistent memory. But what I can do after is I can take... Oh, hang on. Nope, my bad. I don't have the newspaper yet. Newspaper is quite an easy way to get occult scraps. Oh well. Okay, the skill is now level 7. Its power aspects have also increased. Edicts Inviolable, the precepts and occlusions and the precepts of occlusion and dissolution, their jealous enforcement is the nature of the Calyptra. So again, I don't have, I'm not fully where I want to be on that one, but at the very least we're going from a 7 to an 8. So in this case here, we're sort of on the verge of what we need. Now I have enough to level up Auroral Contemplation, so I'm going to lock that in before I finish for tonight. There tisn't can be no tizzer. Mrs. Kill, as every local gossip knows, came from France to marry Mr. Kill, but there's scant trace of the continent in her accent now. We did wind up with another fear, but that's life. So we will take our Auroral Contemplations. So Faust here. Now the replacement ones, we've got Fear, Revelation, Foresight. And I think what I'll do here, we'll do Bittersweet Certainty and Contradiction. So the reason I'm doing it this way is I imagine that I'm going to be able to use the Hail next. So what I want to try and do is I want to push out the use of the Hail as late in the day, as late in the day as possible, because of course we have so many of these other lesser levels to get through. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do 2 levels for Auroral Contemplations, but please tell me I did the right one. Yes, okay. But yeah, I think we're in good shape to get Auroral Contemplations up. We're already from 5 to 6. And then Disciplines of the Scar should allow us to level it up to 8. And again, the Edge and the Lantern doesn't affect Pentiments and Precursors, which would normally be the top priority given that it is the highest level item. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. And I need to just figure out where I am in terms of the overall recording, but we should have another episode for the week, and I will try and take that opportunity to kind of clear through all of the lessons that I currently have, so we can start focusing on, the Numina and some of the different things that we can do with it now that we sort of have the specific one that I had been waiting on. But all of that will happen in the next episode. Until then, take care.